Okay, so in this video we're going to revisit the 5-gallon self-watering bucket, and I had made some small changes to the way I was doing it originally, and we're going to do things a little bit differently now. And as you can see, and later in the video I'll show you some of the other pails I got going, the results are coming out perfectly fine, they're good, and the soil is not getting waterlogged. So the reason why I'm making some of the changes is because when you normally make your wicking cup and you fill it with soil or a wicking soil, I was using Coco Coir. You can use whatever you want as your wicking cup, the material in the wicking cup. What I was finding is that down at the bottom of the pail where it does most of the wicking of the water, I was finding that the soil was becoming rancid all the way at the bottom because it's always wet. It never has a chance to dry out. And that's a problem. That's an environment for diseases to get in there, especially fungi. Any kind of fungi will survive in that. It'll grow, it'll fester, and it'll eventually infect your plant and kill it. And that'll change the results of what you would want to get out of your plant. You want to get the best you can out of your plant. So I wanted to make some changes to the wicking style, and I don't want that soil to remain wet, mainly because, first of all, when you have this much soil in the pail, it's not going to dry out that fast. Okay, it's going to take time for it to dry out. Number one, you could go a few days without watering it. You're not going to kill the plant. And when you do water it, it waters all the way through, and it never stays wet. It always seems to like dry to a certain point, and you're not wicking up water into the bottom of that pail where the diseases begin. So you don't have to worry about your container drying out. That's something that I've come to find that is a very big disadvantage when it comes to wicking containers. So I did make some changes how I'm going to do this. And we'll look at the results later on in the year. I'll take the pails apart, we can check them out, and go from there. Alright, so we're going to show you how I set it up, start to finish. I'm going to give you the measurements I used on this pail, where to drill them, how long the pieces to cut, so you can actually follow this video exactly and pretty much assemble it exactly what I have. So the first thing you want to do is get your pail. Then the next thing you want to do is drill a hole in the side of your pail, preferably about 1/2 of an inch, or even a little larger if you want to go, but about a 1/2 inch hole. That's about what I used. And from the inside of the container, let me see if I can get you in there, from the inside of the container to the, let's see if you can see that here, to that bottom of that hole. So roughly from the inside to the bottom of the hole, I'm making them roughly around 3.5 inches. You can go a little bit lower. I wouldn't go too high with it, but definitely keep it, you don't need that much water in the bottom because we're not using it mainly for wicking anymore. So you want to make that hole approximately to the bottom of the hole, 3.5 inches to the bottom of the hole. If you do that, you're fine. I'd go a little lower if you want, go 3.25. You're fine. Don't worry about it. You don't really need that much space in there. It just holds more water, and I'll get into why holding more water is good for the plant later on down the road. Okay, so and the next thing you're going to need to do is cut 4 pieces of either 2-inch or 1.5 inches. Again, I made those 4 inches long. You have 4 pieces now cut at 4 inches long. You can go 3-inch pipe if you want to get it, 2-inch pipe. 1.5 inches is the cheapest. I happen to have leftover pieces of 1.5 inches, so I just used what I had. So you're going to take these 4 pieces. You want to make sure you line it up with your handle here. And what I do is I put 4 pieces, one lined up with each side of the handle, and then 2 the other way, like an X. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So I can't show it to you on camera, but you're going to have to take my word for it. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So now you got your pail cut, your hole is drilled, you got your 4 pieces in there. The next thing you're going to need to do is take your lid. Now I don't have a lid to cut and show you how I do it, but just take your lid, which normally has a center in it like this. Take the lid that comes with it, And when you buy your lids, I don't recommend buying the white ones. When you buy them from Lowe's, they got these flimsy blue ones that click on real light, but they're easy to come off. Don't buy these or you'll pull your fingernails off trying to get this rim off at the end of the year when you got to dump your soil. And yes, you got to pop these off, but you want these rings because I'm going to show you why in a minute. So you're going to want to take your lid, and I use a Dremel drill, and just Dremel around the outside as much as you can reasonably. You'll see these little tabs right here. You're going to want to cut just to the inside of those tabs, and you'll be left with something like this. You want to be left with a ring like that, and you want that to kind of tight on the inside. You may have to fudge with it a little, sand it, file it, whatever you want to do. Eventually what will happen is this piece will sit down on top of here, like so. Let's see, I usually arrange this. See, when the lid's up, I want this usually opposite of this hole. So when I'm filling it, the water's not blowing out of the side. So I usually put this on the opposite side. All right, so that'll go in there. Now, once you cut your lid, you're going to want to make a bunch of holes in here. You don't have to make this many holes, or you could do it any way you want. I just made a bunch of holes. You could follow that pattern. I went 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I went between these two holes and went 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I laid it out. All right, and then you'll drill a hole somewhere here, and that hole will receive your fill pipe. All right, so eventually that'll be your hole for your fill. Not that you even really need this, because you don't need to worry about filling it. You will be watering this, top watering it on a regular basis. So you're probably never going to have to use that anyway, but I put it in there just for the sake of having it inside the pail. It helps sturdy the plant as it grows. I have something to tie to, but you really don't need it to fill your container, because we're not doing it the old way anymore. Okay, so the next thing I did, and you could use whatever you want. If you want to go get a piece of 3-inch, that's fine. I used regular soda cups from the store. Sheetz has these big soda cups, and I just cut them open and made this little thing out of it, which is going to eventually receive this on the bottom. So I made this. Use a piece of 3-inch pipe or a piece of 4-inch pipe if you want. Basically, you want something in the center to kind of hold that up a little bit, the very center, because you got 4 pieces of PVC holding up each side of this thing. Then you want something in the center to hold that. You don't want that to start buckling down. You need something in there. All right, and once you put that in there and you take your wicking cup, for me it works perfectly fine, and you push it down in there, it kind of locks the whole thing in there together. So it works really, really well, to be honest with you. And I like it. It works for me. All right, so that's what I do. Something similar, something like that. You know, you don't have to do that exactly, but you're going to want to make your wicking cups out of something. Again, I use these soda cups, and they work fine. So I'm going to put this on the inside. And by the way, that height from the bottom of this to the top, that height is the same as those 3.5-inch pieces of PVC I got in there. So basically, you want to put that in here. Then you're going to want to take your hole, put it opposite of this hole. You want to make sure, though, you get that centered and line all that up. What's going to happen is eventually this handle is going to stay in an upright position like this. So as the plants grow, they grow around the handle, and you know, you can transport it. You don't have to worry about pushing into the plants to lift it up. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. All right, so the next thing I do is, the old way I was doing these wicking cups is I was putting a piece of landscape fabric in between these 2 cups, and then I'd fill it with soil so the soil doesn't wash through, and then, you know, that would wick up the water and water the pot that way. Well, we're not doing it that way anymore. So now, what I'm doing now is I'm removing the inner cup for a moment, taking out that wicking thing. I want to get off all the old stuff on there if possible. And then, it doesn't have to line up perfectly, but you see I got holes in the bottom here on both cups, so I put the cups together and I just burned holes through them. all the way around. And then your cups are going to be like that. Now you don't need the inner cup, but I use that for extra strength. And if I ever decide to go back to wicking, I can always use the same thing, just new piece of fabric, cloth on there, and just use soil, and I have the whole system set up. So I got both cups in there. You don't need the inner cup. But if you do have it made up that way, don't throw it out. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is, instead of filling it with Coco Coir, we're going to fill it with rock. Not as much rock as I would have liked to have had in there, but basically what you see is this is filled with crushed stone. And I recommend, if you use crushed stone, to use the Quikrete type of gravel, the black granite type gravel. That's what I recommend. For some reason, that granite is amazing for the plant's health. I don't know what, there's something in it. I don't know what it is, but it makes plants grow like crazy. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is cut yourself a piece of landscape fabric like that. You cut it any size you want. I roughly cut them about roughly about 13 by 13. You could even go 12 by 12. What you want to do here is cut an X directly in the middle, because what that's going to do is that's going to receive your wicking cup, and eventually you're going to cut a hole here. You don't do it right away until that's in place, and you're going to cut a hole here, and that's going to be for your fill pipe. So what I do from there is I basically just take my cloth. Now again, you're not going to have your holes cut until they're in place. This one you want cut so you can set it in. This is last year's cloth, and you can use it over and over and over. The only reason why I'm using this is because I don't want the soil to just fall through those holes. So I need something to stop the soil from falling down into the water reservoir below. So the next thing I'm going to do is put this in here. Okay, I'm going to take my wicking cup and put it down into the middle. Push it all the way down. In fact, I need to get a little more gravel for this. I don't want it that low, because I really don't. It needs a little more gravel, because that will fill up with soil if it's not up all the way. And then what will happen is it'll start wicking, and we don't want to do that. So I'll be right back. Let me just grab a cup of gravel. Okay, so let's just top that off. Now, if a little extra gravel falls along the side, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. It's not going to hurt nothing. For some reason, something with this gravel makes plants grow like crazy. It really spikes them up. Now you're going to take your fill tube and stick it in that hole that I showed you. Oh, yeah, this is where I make mistakes a lot. You want to make sure your handle's not in this side, so when your fill tube is in there, you ain't going to be able to lift it if you need to. So make sure your handle's on the other side. Then put your fill tube in there, like so. And basically, that's it. You're ready to fill it with soil now. So let's dump some soil in there, and we're going to put that tomato plant in there. Again, you know, the very bottom, I don't press it in really hard. I just kind of tamp it down a little bit, mainly to set this pipe so it's not flinging around. You know, once it's in place, you know, you can just pile all the dirt you want in there. Just want that stable as you're filling it, you know. Now, of course, take your tomato plant, kind of size up where you want it. I want to come a little higher than that. You know, I want to come down to around here with it. And you want to leave a space, like a good 1-inch space between the rim and here. And you want to leave some room for that, so don't overfill it. Just make sure you put enough in there. And of course, I'm using my super soil mix. which really works good for these containers. But just like any soil you put in there, super soil, regular soil, any kind of soil you're going to put in here, if it's going to stay wet on a regular basis, it's going to get fungal. It's going to become anaerobic. So I don't like the fact that it's staying wet all the time. It's not good for the lower roots, especially for tomatoes. Alright, good. So I just pull everything up around the side. We want to pinch off some of these low suckers and leaves, because they're not going to live, they're not going to come up through the soil. I might even pull these off. That should probably be pretty good. Just like that. Beautiful. Alright, so now we want to bring that soil up. And you know, in my other video with the super soil, I was telling you to take out larger pieces of wood like this. Don't worry about them. Those will break down by the end of the year. They're not gonna remain in there. I usually like to tuck it in around the side like this. That way the water drains down the center. Again, you're going to want to make sure there's at least an inch space between the top of this and your soil. About. It doesn't have to be exact, but something like that, you know. A little bit more there and we're done with that. Now keep in mind too, as this plant sits throughout the summer and it's getting wet and rained on, this soil is going to go way down anyway. So don't worry, it's gonna drop in height no matter what, but you still want a space in there. You don't want that right up against your cloth. Okay, so this part's not an exact science, but it's close. Also too, before you put your top mulch on, you're gonna want to add some of this rock to around the sides of it. Let me get one more cup. There's actually quite a bit of gravel going on this now as opposed to before. Yeah, just pile the gravel right up against the plant. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to put more gravel on top of the mulch. I just want this to come through the hole. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take your top mulch. This is going to become the covering for the top. So roughly what I do is I just kind of fold it in half a little bit, because that's roughly the center of the pail. And I just kind of fold it out that way. And we just cut off a corner. You cut that inside corner off, and voila, you got a nice hole there. Next thing I do is I look at the space between the center and where the pipe is, and it's usually roughly something like this, somewhere right around here. So you just want to fold that over. Just take a little piece off because we're going to squeeze this on. Like that. And just feed your plant through. Now it's kind of a pain in the neck to do this, but it's well worth it because believe me, I was having a problem with chipmunks that were digging holes in my containers, digging my plants up. I had to put something down, and this is the way I did it. So, and this works great, better than any top mulch I've used in the past. Better than putting wood bark on top, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Let me just get this through. Just be careful you don't break the stems and the leaves, you know. And 2 more leaves. 1 there, 1 there. Okay, good. Okay. Now, you got your rock on the bottom. You got your plant coming through the rock. Give it a little shake if you need to, just to settle it down. And that's pretty much the way I want to see it, just like that, you know. You don't have to worry about trimming it or nothing. And take your snap ring that's left. And you're going to want to kind of pull this taut as you go through it. Leaf in there? Yeah, there is. There's another leaf. I missed that one. See, it's easy enough to pull out. Believe me, with the blue rims, it's so much easier than this thing. These are hard, man. And they don't come out quite as good. They're really hard to work with. Really make sure it's on there good so it doesn't come off. Okay? And that's basically it. I'm going to put 1 more cup of gravel around here. Don't worry about taking the lower leaves off, that's fine for now. And so I usually put this layer of rock right on top of it, and that's pretty much it. And you just take your little tag, whatever you got, and just stick it in there like that, and you're done. That's it. And now what happens is here, oh yeah, this thing here, just take your scissor. You can cut that off. If you cut that off though, next year when you go to put this lid on, it's hard to do it with very tight tolerances. I usually leave the excess. What I do is cut this like that. Pull that up like so. And leave the handle in the upwards position as this plant grows. And the reason why you want to do this is because later on when this plant gets big and you need to move your container around, you can always just grab it by the handle and move it. It's always very easy. Never let your handle fall down. Let it grow into wherever the handle is. So that's very important. And the other thing you can do to top it off is put your funnel in here. I haven't been using funnels because I'm not really filling the reservoir. The remainder of the rain that comes down and the amount of water that I water through the surface of this area here, it all washes through and eventually drips down into this lower holding bin. The reason why I did it this way again is because I'm finding that the lower part of the container is becoming anaerobic and a plant is eventually getting sick by the end of the year. So I wasn't happy with the results of that. By doing what I'm doing, I am forcing that tomato plant and pepper plant, peppers and tomatoes I'm doing this with, I'm forcing the tomato plant to push its roots down deep past into that wicking cup and then throw its roots into the water to suck the water up. Very similar to the way it would do it in your land or your property. It looks for deep water. So it's the same kind of concept, except here we're doing it in a container. So I took the cloth out of it so those roots can grow through the rocks and then go into the water and soak the water up that way. That's the best thing you can do. Also too, if you notice that there's nothing up here that is organic material, there's no organic matter at all, so that should prevent almost 100% of the blight problems that I'm having, like early and late blight. There's nothing here for late blight to live on and start to grow. Everything is either plastic or it's rock, and blight doesn't really want to live on rock because it doesn't live on rocks. It needs organic matter. It's a fungus. So I'm not worried about splashing. The other thing too is that this cloth right here is permeable, so the water, when it rains, it hits this, it doesn't splash out, it hits it and then drains through it. It works great. I mean, this stuff is the best top mulch I ever used. I've used plastic before, and plastic seems to suffocate the plant down below, and it causes mold and moss and everything to grow. This is the best stuff you could use for a top mulch. Again, it's not organic material, so you don't have to worry about the blight and all of that stuff. And there's nothing for you to worry about. Just keep the plant well cleaned. Wash the pail around the outside every now and again so it doesn't get any kind of blight or anything on there. And you should be fine. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, I can transport my tomato plant anytime I want. Just simply pick it up and go. The only other things I would add to this would be something like, here, I'll pull this. This was recommended by one of my viewers, actually told me to do this, but it's not quite working out the way they were saying. But the idea is still a great idea. So basically, what I did, or what was recommended to me, is that to take your tomato cages, turn them upside down, and technically they should fit within the container, but they're not quite big enough. They can fit on the inside of the container, so maybe, I don't know. They're just a little. They're not quite big enough to fit all the way around the outside of the container, so they don't quite work that way. But still, I can still attach these somehow to the top of this, so it doesn't move around. And basically, you end up with an upside down tomato cage. You see how they're all upside down? And I'm going to keep my plants, or I'm going to attempt to keep my plants relatively pretty short, probably no higher than 2 to 3 feet, or 3 to 4 feet rather. And that's it. It's going to be getting topped on a regular basis because I may have to transport these when I move, and I don't want to be transporting 6-foot tall tomato plants with big, humongous tomatoes hanging from it. So this is a good alternative to use in the event that I have to move them. So that's one of the only other modifications. As you can see, I took my handles and I rolled these upwards like that. All right, you see how I rolled them up? So as these tomato plants grow, they're going to grow around that handle, and if I need to reach in there and move that tomato plant, I can just grab it like this and lift it up, just like so, very easily. Now, it's not too heavy, or it's not any heavier now that I did what I did with the gravel, as opposed to having the bottom filled with water. Right now, none of the bottoms of these are filled with water, though they do have a little water in the bottom, but they're not filled with water per se. And that's because the tomato roots didn't get that far down. You wanna give that plant a chance to grow and start putting its roots down into there. Then you can start worrying about making sure that that bottom thing is filled with water. You know, you could dump maybe I don't know, half a liter or a liter. It'll hold a gallon of water too, by the way. The bottom of that reservoir that I showed you where to drill a hole, that'll hold roughly a gallon of water. So you might need to put in like a quart a day. It's not going to drink that much water from the bottom. But then again, it might. I don't know. But that's how I'm doing. I'm keeping the handles up and letting the tomatoes grow around those handles so I can pick that plant up anytime I need to and move it. All right. And I think that's it. I think we've pretty much covered one whole planting of a tomato plant. I got one pepper plant I'm going to do the same thing with. And I'm done with the 5-gallon pails. All the rest of my stuff is in the greenhouse. I will do a greenhouse tour a little later on in the year. Once things start picking up in the greenhouse, we will do a greenhouse tour and I'll show you what's going on. But for now, that's how you do your self-watering buckets. And I think I covered everything about them. But that modification is really important. I'm finding that is going to make a major improvement to my tomato health and taking that extra wet soil that it's just simply not using. Because mainly what happens is when it gets really, really hot out, it starts hitting 90 and 100 degrees, the plants they stop transpiring, really. They start to suffocate. But when they stop transpiring, they're not sucking up that water anymore that it's sitting in. So what happens is that water's now sitting in there, beginning to rot the soil and the roots of the plant. So when it's too hot, it's not transpiring, and when it's waterlogged and diseased, it's not going to soak water up. It's just a bad design, in my opinion. And I've made these changes, and we're going to see how they do throughout the year. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be doing really good this year, considering I used really good soil and this new system with this stone in there and the stone on the bottom, and that's how it's going to get down. It's going to get its roots down there to get the water. So I think that's it. If you have any questions about the self-watering containers, this is my newest design. Leave your comments below. If you have any questions, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And that's it. I'll see you on the next one. Oh, did a bird just shit on me? Oh, man. Did that fucking thing shit on me? I think a bird just shit on me.